Hello everyone and welcome to That ESG Show. I'm Shagufta and today I'm going to be in conversation with Santhosh Jayaram, Partner and Head Climate Change, Sustainability and CSR Advisory for KPMG in India. Santhosh is immensely experienced and has been working in the climate and sustainability space for over 25 years. He leads one of the biggest sustainability consulting teams in Asia, has worked across 20 countries, and some of his work with clients are case studies with leading institutes like Harvard and INSEAD. His expertise in the area has been sought in developing standards in the sustainability space. He's also part of the technical committee of Social Stock Exchange by SEBI. Santhosh has a very creative side. He's a prolific writer, photography, and nature enthusiast. He also loves teaching. I've had the privilege of working with Santhosh as part of my journey at MyTech, and I'm really looking forward to our chat today. Thank you so much for joining us, Santhosh.
It's my pleasure, Shagufta.
So we'll start off with something basic. So with majority of corporate India now waking up to ESG, can you talk us through very simply how ESG links to SDGs and can lead to value creation?
It was almost, I think it was somewhere in 2005, maybe 2004. There was a UN publication by the name Who Cares Wins. It was in that publication the first reference of this term comes. The term is referred by the investors. That publication was brought out by a group of investors, which included pension funds, which included some institutional investors. And they say the tone of that report was to say that if an investor cares about environment, social, and governance, then they win on the long term. So I think that was the first reference. And today, especially 2020 was a kind of a very big milestone year for ESG because the term really came up to vogue during that particular year. And so it is a term used by the investors. Now let us look into SDGs. The Sustainable Development Goals, as we know, is the global language, again set from the UN, and it talks about what should be the world's ambition for a better living world. But we all know that for the world to progress to that direction, there is a huge requirement in terms of capital. And where is that capital going to come from? Yes, the governments and the development sector will work, but the private sector and of the commercial capital should also play its role. So I think that's the linkage when we look into from an ESG and SDG connection. 2020 saw a huge allocation of capital towards ESG, which looks into there was a big rise in terms of green bonds. It was a big rise in terms of sustainability-linked funds. The assets under management suddenly increased on the ESG side. We in India saw a huge number of ESG mutual funds being set up. So you suddenly saw the big allocation of capital towards ESG or sustainability, and that is helping drive the SDGs. So that would be the connection I would make.
Right. And how does it link to value creation?
Now, value creation is a terminology which comes in terms of how, when you are doing a particular activity, what it creates. I mean, it will involve in terms of benefits for a different varieties of stakeholders. And when you start looking into the impact from those kind of decisions, activities, and the investments which you make, those resulting into the outcome, and if you start measuring that impact, you will find the real value. Now, value creation means it looks into the positive side of value creation. But anything value means it can be created, it can be destroyed, or it can be maintained as well. So yes, slowly the manner in which people are measuring the value is also improving now. We have now protocols which has come in to measure the natural capital value. We have protocols which has come in terms of social capital valuation. Otherwise, value was only measured in terms of financial value. But I think the improvement in terms of methodologies, in terms of how to kind of value the natural capital and social capital, also is garnering good interest. So we would be able to measure what value is created because of this particular journey going forward.
So, like you said, during the pandemic in 2020, there was that big shift in terms of ESG. How do you think India Inc. fared, with respect to ESG when business survival became sort of the top priority for everybody?
At the start of the pandemic, even I had my skepticism in terms of, the whole focus would change into survival mode. And will that result into a back, the focus would shift from the ESG or sustainability or something like that. But I was proved wrong, and I would be happy about it. By the June, July of 2020, I saw very clearly the call, what we call as the build back better. I think that was a kind of a global call which kind of happened, right? When people started seeing the first impacts of the lockdown, and people started feeling that we should not go back to the old normal. And that call was something which kind of reverberated across. And India was no difference, in the sense that, when there is a kind of a global momentum on something, and everybody will be impacted. And if there is something which the pandemic has taught us, that's the same thing, like everybody across got impacted. So, and also people started realizing what a global impact means. And something like climate change, people have been talking about it, the impacts it can create. But when this pandemic hit us, we suddenly realized what is the magnitude of a global impact. And at least for COVID, we have a hope in terms of vaccination. But for something like climate change, there is no vaccination at all. So people started realizing what can be the global impact. There was this call to build back better. And as I told you, the global investing moved into a sustainable manner. Governments in their building back packages started incorporating the ESG norms to say that whomsoever is kind of getting that package would build better. And with all these kind of things, it's a global movement. And India also participated well into that. And Indian companies also started realizing the importance of ESG. We are seeing more and more board discussions now in the Indian companies around ESG. We have seen many companies announce a separate committee of ESG under the board. We are also seeing, I also talked about the investment which are happening on the ESG in India as well. And I think, and we also saw the regulator moving in. We saw SEBI coming out with a new requirement in terms of ESG disclosures, which is the BRSR. So I think overall, there has been a kind of a momentum from the companies right from the leadership stage. And we also saw the regulator moving in. We also saw the financial sector moving in. So I think we definitely were in tune with the global momentum.
Right. I mean, you spoke about the momentum of ESG and, the lack of talent and the need for integration, which I would think there is no shortcut to. So, with this meteoric rise of ESG investments, coupled with growing demands from customers, from consumers for sustainable products, it has also led to an increase in greenwashing and impact washing. So how do we know when something is too good to be true, and why, and how can companies avoid it?
It's kind of a natural cycle, right? When somebody becomes a big meteoric rise, as you mentioned, there is bound to be people who take advantage of that particular situation. And that's exactly what had happened with ESG as well. And how do you come out of that? I mean, at the end of the day, the regulation has to catch up. And you need to have the proper standards and proper controls and all those things. So I think that's currently happening. And when you look into the European Union's new regulation on sustainable finance, and about a couple of months back, they released a regulation which is called the SFDR, which is the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Requirements. And those requirements are applicable to any investment from Europe, and which would mean that they need to kind of use a particular taxonomy to qualify their investments. And I read some articles which mentioned that after the regulation came in, there has been a reduction in the number of people claiming as sustainable finance, which is very clear, right? I mean, it starts to take that impact. So those people who are trying to kind of greenwash would not be able to do so. So I think the catching up of the standardization, catching up of the regulations, proper definitions around some of these things would kind of reduce that greenwashing. And I think we are in interesting times. And definitely those kind of you will hear more about such kind of things as we go along. And at the end of the day, even today, if you really look at whether the ESG data goes through the same rigor as a financial data, definitely not. So the availability of ESG data and the quality of ESG data is a challenge. And unless those challenges get addressed, some of these kind of greenwashings and all those kind of things would be difficult. But I think the regulations and the practices are moving in that direction.
Simplicity is the hardest thing to achieve, and I think only somebody who's done so much work can talk about such complex things at a very simple level. So if we talk about going beyond the jargon and talking about integrating purpose with profit, like we've been speaking about, what are some basic rules or mantras that, according to you, corporate leaders can use to sort of guide their actions?
I think the important part is that people realize, or people think that doing good comes naturally. Yes, it does come naturally. But what I would say is that I think, I don't remember which book it is. It is in one of the books of Amartya Sen, where he brings in the three elements, Niyat, Niti and Nyaya. And so what, I don't understand many things what he writes, but let me put it that way. I mean, people should not think that I kind of read quite a lot of Amartya Sen. No, I don't understand many things. But simple things I understood is that when he said, Niyat is intent. Just having that intent will not deliver justice or nyaya to the society. The niti, which is the way to channelize that niyat, is very important. The systems, the processes, the standards, those are some things which is very important to convert that niyat into nyaya. I think that has been one of the key learnings which I had, and I usually have repeated this in many places when I spoke. But I think as leaders, we should kind of look at it. Not the intent just will not ensure that you deliver some things. It really requires a set of activities or set of systems, processes, the right kind of people to come together to deliver that justice. So I think that would be my thought to the leaders as to how you can create that bigger impact in society. Yes, the starting point is that intent and the right intent, and that would be my thought.
Right. And talking about starting point, I think sort of inculcating this whole mindset at a young age would lead to a huge impact. So somebody who loves teaching, what would your advice be to the next generation on how can they balance their quest for wealth creation with sustainable life choices?
So I do not think, I think the era of quest for wealth creation is over. And I don't think that it's not going to be wealth creation. I think it is going to be better conditions, and I think the world would be moving in that particular direction. I think people value many other things in life, or at least started now. There was a period where everybody was kind of moving in a direction of wealth creation. But I think that era is kind of tapering down, is what I would say. So for youngsters, as you would see, that what interests them today are different things. People who are now coming out, they are looking at something of a bigger purpose, and it is not just the wealth creation anymore. So I think things are changing, and I think it is for good. And wealth creation is no more the prime motive, is what I can say.
And I think it's our wish and hope as well that we can be part of this positive generational change. Thank you so much, Santhosh, for talking to us. This was very interesting. And I hope you enjoyed it too.
Yes, thank you very much for having me here. And really look forward for our partnership and to create better impactful activities going forward. Thank you.
And building back better.
Building back better.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And this brings us to the end of this episode. We'll see you next week with another interesting conversation. Till then, subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's My Take with a double Y, and follow us on our social media handles.